What's up YouTube, Pop Snorlax here. I know it's been a few weeks since my last update. Between being sick and traveling, I haven't been able to make it to locals recently. However, I did get the chance to play in the ST10 launch event, which was my first experience with Gundam multiplayer format, and it was an absolute blast. I also really enjoyed what ST10 and EVO1 brought to the game, and I'm already putting together a few new decks to test at locals. I'm also excited to go back to locals and play the red-white turn A, so I'll have an update on how that deck performs this coming week. Today though, we have a lot to talk about. We're breaking down the upcoming best of 3 format and updated ban list, which goes into effect on July 24th. Before we get into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell. Your support matters and allows me to keep you updated on Gundam roulettes, deck profiles, card reviews, and more Gundam TCG content. Now, if you're following UniX Gaming, Alonzi, or Rain Knight, or many of the other Gundam content creators, you probably already know that the current meta has become oversaturated with aggro decks, especially blue-purple. The biggest reasoning for that is consistency. These decks almost always have a card to play, can steadily chip away at your opponent's shields, and can usually outspeed deck built around mid to late game strategies. I've been playing card games since I was a kid, starting with Pokemon when it first released, and eventually moving into Yu-Gi-Oh! Because of that, I'm familiar with the different ways card game companies have tried to address the unhealthy metas, when certain cards become too powerful or specific decks become overrepresented. That brings us to the new best of 3 format. I've only been playing Gundam since February, but one thing I've noticed is that if you don't get a good opening hand, or your first few draws don't line up properly, it can sometimes cost you the entire game under the current best of 1 format. I've played a lot of games where best of 3 is the normal, so depending on how your deck is built for mid to late game, it can help reduce the loss percentage based on dead hands, giving you multiple chances to come back with the 3 different rounds. This also opens up to being able to sideboard. This allows players to build their main deck closer to how they originally envisioned it, while keeping stronger substitutes available for specific matchups. This week at my locals, we're actually testing out best of 3, as well as we're including sideboards, so I'm excited to review the sideboard that I put together when I take turn A this week. For example, you can keep answers to aggressive decks in your sideboard without building your entire main deck around the expectation that every event, whether it's locals, an NTC, or regional, is going to be dominated by aggro. Playing up to 3 games also gives the players a chance to recover from one game where they simply had terrible draws or an awkward level curve, which we all know that happens in Gundam. Sometimes your deck just doesn't cooperate. The biggest downside is obviously time. Best of 3 matches can take significantly longer than best of 1, especially when playing against slower control decks or players who take longer turns. Me and a few buddies actually experienced this at my first NTC. The store decided to run best of 3 because it was their first time hosting the event, and let me tell you, it was a very long day. It took about 6 to 8 hours for the amount of people that were there. Still, best of 3 is the only first major attempt to adjust the current state of the game. We also have a new ban list going into effect on July 24th, but I also saw the note that it's not going to be live for this upcoming July regionals, so you get to still play the deck that you want, at least for regionals. Everything else, the ban goes into effect July 24th. I'll be honest, I expected a few of these changes, but I never would have guessed exactly how they were going to approach some of them. So starting with ban cards, we have Angsha. Angsha can no longer be included in either your main deck or your sideboard. Out of every card I thought could potentially be banned, Angsha was not at the top of my list. However, I understand what they're trying to accomplish. Angsha is a strong combination of a pinger and an attacker, and it pairs extremely well with cards like Gun Tank. Removing it limits the number of efficient damage effects available to aggressive decks and represents the first major hit to purple. While there are a few other cards I feel probably could have been banned over Angsha, like, I feel like Barbados Adapt probably would have been a good hit compared to this. I'm okay with it, I guess. It's not really... I don't feel like the card game's at a point yet, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Was back in the day, where a card needs specifically banned, like Yada Gracia, where you had Yada Lock, and people literally couldn't play the game. Like, to me, that's a reason why cards should be banned. Limited, on the other hand, I could understand a better argument for why it could be limited. Next, we have the restricted list. Corsica remains restricted to 2 copies, and there were no additional cards added to this category. So, with that, Corsica, I think, is fine. 2 of. Like, I think with GDO4, we probably could have brought it back up. but at the same time, because they're trying to diminish Blurple's impact as well as like just overall aggro with this ban list, I don't see it coming back up to 4, probably till maybe next year, depending on how many more sets we get. I will say one card I expected to potentially see limited was Amuro Ray, but they kind of did something else with him. He's not limited, he's not banned in a sense. So that brings us to the banned pairs, which I'm going to get into Amuro Ray in a second, but the first ones that they're showing, this is the first time I've ever seen this happen in a card game. At least for me, I've never seen this happen in Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, or Magic. When I played the Final Fantasy card game, I don't think I even saw it like that. It's an interesting way to limit powerful combinations without completely banning the individual card. So the first banned pair we have today is Guntank and the new M1 Astray Shrike from GDO5, which isn't even out yet. But this goes into effect when GDO5 comes out, so that makes sense why they're putting this on the list. These are essentially the same units with different names and traits. I actually like this restriction because it helps different archetypes maintain their own identities. Multiple colors and archetypes can still have access to similar units effects, but players can no longer combine both versions to create an overly consistent aggressive package. So you can't have 8 turn 1 pingers that are just going to be, you just expect it. Like, you're going to end up losing units right off the bat because if it's rested, Guntank, 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 Astray, Astray, Astray. Now the next banned pair we have is Amuro Ray and Mikazuki August. If you've played Blurple or played against Blurple, you already know how strong this combination is. For this, these two pilots can no longer be included in the same deck. This is huge for Blurple because you really don't have, you can't really play the standard Blurple without these two in the deck. Like, yes, there's going to be a lot of variations of people trying to keep playing Blurple, but this basically makes Blurple kind of dead in the water, at least the current iteration that exists. And to go back to how interesting of a way that they're banning this, these are two cards that are just completely different from each other. But because of their combination, Bandai felt it was necessary that you can't play these cards in a deck together if they want to try and fix the game. So it's kind of crazy how they're approaching this. I do like that they decided not to limit Amuro. Even though I love Amuro, he is a very strong card. And we're getting another version of Amuro in Catra in GDO5. And I'm excited because he's a white Catra. He's a white Amuro. But yeah, this is a pretty wild approach. But you could tell that this list, they really wanted to crack down on aggressive decks and Blurple especially. And that brings us to the final restriction. And this one completely caught me off guard. Players can now only choose one type of standard level 2 1-cost units with 2 AP and 2 HP, and also have no effect. You can still run up to 4 copies of the unit you choose, but you can no longer mix and match multiple versions to run 8, 12, or even 16 vanilla units like we've seen in this past meta. You also can't mix the 4 copies that you have. Like, if you're playing Gem, you gotta play 4 Gem. You can't have 2 Gem and 2 Zaku. You gotta play the 4 Gem, which I feel it's a little weird that they're limiting it in that way as well. But they're trying to stay consistent with how the cards are kept in the deck, I guess, in a sense. And I understand why they're making such a huge change. A lot of the decks were running up to, I would say, between 12 to 16 of these, which, if you haven't played them, like yourself, they create consistency in your opening hand. And that is what you need to really take the board from your opponent in the beginning of the game. If you can keep playing consistently and able to answer your opponent's cards, like, you'll have a much stronger chance of winning against your opponent. And the fact that players could flood the board with cheap attackers and basically whittle down their shields by turn 4, turn 5 against slower decks that need time to establish their strategy. By the time they were trying to even get set up, the game's usually over. Now, I know there's a lot of blocker decks where it's like, oh, this doesn't happen against aggro, but there are a lot of other decks that this does happen a lot. And I've played both blocker, I've played both aggro, and I know, like, if your opponent does not draw properly and you're playing an aggro deck, like, the game is basically in the bag for you. But with these restrictions, this should help whittle down the amount of aggro decks that we'll actually be seeing. Like, I think Green Red or 1 Year War might still have options to play with, as there's the 2 different Zaku 2s for green, the one that breaks shields and then your standard 2/2 unit. So aggro's not completely dead, but this does make it to where it's not overly prevalent on how many low bodies they can have. So it makes it a lot more, it helps limit the consistency that the aggro decks are able to create, giving more of a chance to decks that were not able to even compete this season. These changes were definitely not what I expected, but I will say I'm excited to see how the meta develops from here. Like, I will say I'm not a fan of the limiting of the standard 2. I would like to have at least maybe 2 different 2/2s, because I would like to have consistency in my deck to a point, and I think 8 level 1 units are good if you're playing an aggressive deck, or a mid-range deck, because I like to be able to, like, have a play every turn. But this kind of limits it, so I have to rethink how I'm going to build certain decks depending, but I don't think it's extremely bad on how it is. I am interested to see how the community is going to react to this and how the meta ends up turning out, because I'm also excited to play like G Gundam when it comes out, and I know a few other decks, and obviously if aggro is still the problem it is, like, some decks just won't get the light of day. But with this new ban list, we have a much better chance of seeing, like, maybe Academy is going to make some waves because it can actually set up a board. But who knows? We'll see. With the release of GDO5 right out around in the corner, players are going to have to rethink how they build and structure their decks. And we could definitely see a much wider variety because of this. But yeah, let me know what you think about these changes in the comments. Do you think this is the right way to address the current meta, or do you think they kind of went too far with it? So I'm Papa Snorlax, and I'll see you next time.